Welcome to Overcoming by Faith's online Bible study with Pastor Rick. We hope you are blessed by today's message. Now let's join Pastor Rick.
Hi, this is Pastor Rick. Glad you're with me today. We're going to continue our study today as we talk about how difficult it is for God to move us to the place He wants us to be. It's a great study that I think has helped me think about my life. I've asked myself the question, are you hard to move? Is it difficult, Temple, to get you from here to there? And I believe for a lot of us it is. Specifically, we've been talking for the last couple of weeks about sexual intimacy and how difficult it is for God to get us to see this differently. And how when you sit down with a person and you're trying to help them grow in their walk with God and you're trying to help them, the romantic, intimate part of their life can be the challenge. So let me ask you this question. Has it been a challenge for you? If you were honest, if you were open before God, would you say, yeah, I've made some decisions, I've made some choices that I think have not been in my best interest. And I have slipped off into relationships. I end up in relationship after relationship after relationship, all because I just can't seem to quite get it right. It's like I'm stuck someplace. So the question is, why is that hard? I think it's hard because you will not commit to three disciplines. Three things that can help you get past this repeated habit in your life. So what you tend to do if you're not careful, right, is you date one person, you fall in and out of relationships, you end up doing things that embarrass you. How do you avoid that? Well, here's what I think is really important. Whenever you want to know how to do something right, look at somebody who does it right. Find somebody who's an example of focus and clarity and use them as a model. Ask them questions. In Genesis chapter 39, there's a story about Joseph. And this is a young guy who is, by the way, when we first meet him, he's 17 years old. He's a teenager, high school student. And he is a high school student age, better say it that way. And this is the guy who shows us how you rise to a place of victory. Now, in chapter 39 of Genesis, he's already an adult. And he's now in slavery. He's been sold into slavery by his brothers. He has been unfairly treated. He is in this place, and he now is working in a house with a man named Potiphar in Genesis 39. And in this position, he has found a way to have a good attitude. He is hardworking, he's diligent, and all of that comes to a head when he faces a temptation. Now, here's what I want you to see. Oftentimes, your greatest moments of vulnerability come when you have advantage. You have money, position, opportunity. You end up, if you're not careful, getting comfortable, and you start becoming hard to move. When you get money, I call it the I got money disease. Now you have opportunity because you can do this, you can do that. Well, in Genesis 39, an amazing thing happens. This young man is working hard, and the wife of the man he works for, Potiphar's wife, decides that she wants to have a sexual relationship with Joseph. So she comes after him in a very aggressive way. Now, you can go through a whole lot of whys in this, but that's a reality that people face, and many of you faced it. You have been Potiphar's wife who wanted somebody, and for reasons you couldn't explain, they just looked like chocolate to you or something, and you want to taste. And I don't mean to be flippant here, but I mean in reality, it's about like that. You just want to try somebody. Sometimes you're the person who is the individual that's being pursued, like Joseph was in Genesis 39. Either way, I want you to think about this. How hard is it for God to move you from being that way? How hard is it? So if you were Potiphar's wife and God was trying to get your attention and say, hey, girl, you shouldn't do this. This guy works for you. Leave him alone. Don't be flirting. That's sexual harassment. Is it hard to get you to stop? Is it difficult? If so, why? Well, Paul said in Romans, we studied in our last study, because we have a sin nature. It's fun. For some of us, and if we're honest, there are moments when that's just fun. I just want to try somebody. I want to know what it's like to be with that person. And so is it hard to move you off of that? And in this story, she never changed. This is a story. She lied until the end. In the end, she accuses him of rape, and he gets locked up in prison for it. People sometimes are stuck in places that's horrific, and she is hard to move. She never changes, except this reality. Some people will never change. They'll lie to the grave. They'll never change, ever. Now, on Joseph's side, though, she's trying to move Joseph into an area of carnality, and he says no. See, there's a good side to this. You can become hard to move in a good way. Joseph would not allow her to move him. And there were three things that I think that stood out to him that made him a guy that rose above this temptation. The first thing about Joseph was, and this is drawn from a series I did some time ago called How to Avoid Being Bedroom Blinded. It's a series that was wonderful. It's called Bedroom Blindness, and it went through this whole study of sexual temptation and how it all works and how you can end up in a place that you don't want to be and how to get out of it. But let me draw three things I said in this series that I think might be helpful to you. Number one, I said if you want to be a person who's free, you have to first of all be privately consistent. Privately consistent. I'm going to show you that there was an encounter that he had with Miss Potiphar that could have went the wrong way, but he didn't allow it to. Let me read for you the story, and let me show you how this young man responded. And I'm going to start in chapter 39. I'm going to read a little bit about his life, catch you up a little bit, and we'll come back and I'll show you. Genesis 39:1 says this. Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. Now, so he bought him, Potiphar did, when he was 17. So just think with me now. He's 17 years old. He's a slave, but he'd been sold into slavery by his brothers unfairly. His 11 brothers got together, and they were angry with him, and they sold him into slavery. They didn't like the way he communicated. They thought he was horrible, so they sold him into slavery and lied to their father about it. So in verse 2, watch this. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. So he grows up in this guy's house. Miss Potiphar watches him grow up. But he's successful, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. Now watch this. Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Faithful worker, hard worker. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. Now he worked really hard to get from this bad place to a good place. Sold into slavery, could have had a bad attitude, could have been, but he wasn't. He decided to take what he had, make it work. Well, watch verse 5. So it was from the time that he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had, that on all that he had in the house and in the field, watch this now, it said, so it was that from the time, this is important now, verse 5, that he had made him overseer of his house, and all that he had, that on all that he had of his house, of his field, the Lord blessed and prospered. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. Notice that. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, and in the house and in the field. That's what I mean to read for you. Verse 6. Then he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now, I just, when I read that, I just go, what an amazing thing. Joseph could have been a bitter person, an angry person, but Joseph was easy to lead, easy to move forward. He stepped right over the issues in his life, stepped right over the complaints, stepped right over all that. And now, watch what happens. He is going to be tempted in verse 8 in a way that he never expected. But the first thing I want you to notice about Joseph was he was privately consistent. And the question is, are you? He was, when you looked at his life, the whole of his life, he was a hard worker, faithful, from 17 all the way up until he was an adult, young adult. Now look at verse 8 and watch what happened. He is a man who secondly has what I call firm boundaries. So here are the two things. Number one, he's privately consistent. That's the first thing I want you to notice about Joseph. And secondly, he is a man who is firm boundaries. If you're going to be a person who moves forward in life, you have to have firm boundaries. If you're going to overcome your temptations, You got to have firm boundaries. I do this and I don't do that. Look at verse 8. It said in verse 6, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. This is verse 6. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph and said to him, lie with me. So here comes Joseph. He is absolutely good looking. And let me tell you, if the Bible says you're good looking, right? And she looks at him and she's not even tactful. She just looks at him and said, come have sex with me. Come lie with me. Just bam, no warm up, nothing. Just say, come on, boy. And all of a sudden, in that moment, he's got to make a decision. Now, in that moment of temptation, here's the question. Is it hard for God to move you? You're fine until you're tempted. You're spiritual, you read the Bible, you care about God. But when a temptation comes, you are alone, nobody's coming, you're in the house, you're by yourself, nobody will ever know it, and it looks like a great thing to do. And you feel like doing. In that moment, is it hard for God to get your attention? Notice with me how Joseph responds compared to Miss Potiphar. Listen to what happens. Joseph is easy to move. She is not. Here's what Joseph says to her in verse 8. He refused. No, I'm not doing that. That's a boundary I will not cross. And then he goes on. He doesn't just say no. He says why. See, in order for you to really be faithful, you have to know why. Here's what he said. Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house. He gave me everything in his house to manage for him. And he has committed all that he has to my hand. Verse 9, there is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you. Now I want you to listen to what he said. There's nobody in this house that's greater than me. And that's really a bit of a slam because you're his wife, but in this culture, the wives didn't have many rights. They couldn't own property. They couldn't lead. And he says, I'm the greatest guy in this house. And I love the fact that not only does he know that, but he said, but you're his wife. And he says it to her twice. He's kept back you because you are his wife. He knew the boundary. I'm not doing that. I refuse to do that. I refuse to do that. I've seen so many people cross marital boundaries and have, affairs with people. And it's just always amazing how they justify it. It's like you go, come on, really? Potiphar gave me all this power. Why? That's his wife. That's her husband. Don't you see that? It's not yours. But she doesn't treat him right. That's not the point. So, then he makes a really profound statement. How then can I do this great wickedness? How can I do this? 3 things he did. Number 1, he refused. Number 2, he said he was loyal. Number 3, he knew his sexual boundaries. He could have sex, but not with this person. This person is not mine. Now, you could ignore that. But here's what I want to promise you. As long as you have no boundaries, as long as you're the person who doesn't care, then you're hard to move. Hard to move to a place of blessing. And I watch people all the time, they'll ignore this and they think God doesn't notice it. But Joseph said, no, this is wicked. This is a crime. If I do this, this is a crime. He viewed it as not only a crime, but he said it's a sin against God. That God looks at this and says, okay, now I gave you all of this. Pastor, can I ask you a question? You ever been tempted? Sure I have. Absolutely. By who? Oh, that's not important. I mean, you see somebody cute, right? And You have a thought and it comes to your mind. You mean even you? Oh, please. It's really not about your title. It's about being just a person. But here's what I've learned. In those moments when something's trying to move me to a place of compromise, I try to keep in mind what Joseph said. Number one, I've been trusted. There's a trust that's not often given to people. Not only am I violating a covenant I made with Diane, but I'm violating a covenant I made with God. And then when something else, I'll just say this from personal observation over the years. People think you can't tell it. There's something you lose when you compromise. People can tell. I always say it like this. They'll look at you and say, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. But there's something I smell. There's something when they're talking or something. There's something. People know. It's in your eyes. You know? When you drink a lot, smoke a lot, it shows in your skin. People can tell. You can't hide it. And so in this moment, Joseph says, no. He refused. I'm not doing that. I will not be moved. Potiphar's wife, totally different. Her attitude was, you're going to do this today. You are going to do this today. And for whatever reason, she had this fantasy in her mind that this would be like the great conquest. Whether she'd done it before, probably had, who knows. But there's this amazing position, she said, in verse 10. One day was the day she decided is the day. So it was, verse 10 of Genesis 39. She said, you know what? Today, sir, is the day that we're going to do this, and no compromise. So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her. She asked over and over again to lie with her or to be with her. And this is a daily challenge. And notice, he couldn't be moved. He wouldn't compromise. Verse 11, but it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside. She'd put everybody out of the house. She made sure he was totally alone. And then she came and she caught him. She grabbed him. She was going to force him. She caught him, dragged him, and said, lie with me. You know what's amazing? That the assumption that women can't be this aggressive, that they can't put together the right scenario, the right environment, the right words, the right look, all with the intent of pulling you into this trap, into this place. Boy. But the Bible said he left his garment and he fled. He ran. I'm not moving from my convictions. I'm not moving beyond this boundary. Now, the end result was tragic. He ended up in prison because she lied on him. But in the end, if you keep reading, he ends up becoming the second man in charge of Egypt. God redeemed him, restored him, gave him back everything she'd taken. And in the end, he won. But it's all because he wouldn't be changed. But I don't know if you've ever thought about this or not. She never did change. Are you her or him? What are you? Are you going to live this way forever? Are you going to live in this place of bondage forever? Is this what you're going to do? Pursue people sexually all of your life, conquest after conquest, until you die. And that's your life. You go to church, you hunt down, matter of fact, you shop churches so you can find new people. If you're not careful, you can become predatory, a predator. You can become a person. Don't turn it off. Just hang with me for a minute. You can get to a place where it's hard to move you from being this way. You call it love, and God calls it bondage. This doesn't mean you're a bad person. This definitely doesn't mean you're not loved by God. It just means it's not good for you. And so you decide what you want. In life, you get to do that. So, Pastor Rick, what's the bottom line? The bottom line is, are you hard to move? The bottom line is, are you hard to change? The bottom line, will this always be you? There are moments in my life when I'm alone. And I travel a lot, and I have a lot of alone moments. And there are moments when I decide, just me, by myself. Ricky Temple, are you hard to move? Are you going to go with me, or are you going to go with the flow? What are you going to do? I tell a story. I was in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, as a matter of fact, in a hotel on the beach, preaching. And I was preaching to thousands of people in several conferences around Brazil. And I remember I was coming in a hotel lobby, and another friend was with me, and these two guys meet these two girls, and they smiled at us, and they came up and says, "You're Americans, aren't you?" And in that moment, I'm in Rio. Nobody knows me. Wow. But I didn't cross that boundary. I'm not Superman. I just don't want to live that way. I don't want to be that way. Can you be? Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. That's not hard. That's easy. The consequences aren't, but it's easy. If you're looking for an opportunity to compromise, it'll show up. As a matter of fact, it will call your name. All you have to do is desire it. And sometimes even if you don't desire it, like this young man, Joseph, it will find you. But you've got to decide, Lord, I don't want to be hard-headed. That's what my mom used to call it. I don't want to be a person that's hard to bless and hard to advance. I don't want to have a culture that robs me of the ability to have the life that you dream for me and that I dream for myself. I don't want to spend my life apologizing. I don't want to spend my life ashamed. I've learned a few things about my life. A nice house, a nice car, a few nice clothing, some nice stuff to wear. All that's not enough. I have to decide. I will not be moved. I shall not be moved. But like a tree planted by the waters, I shall not, the song say, be moved. And I believe that's what you need to be. Psalms 1. You need to be the kind of person who says that. And so I want you to think about it. I want you to think about this, and I want you to think about this. You know, I love the Bible. I love the power of it, and I'm going to show you something I wasn't planning on sharing with you, but if I can get my eyes to focus and my head in the right place here, I'm going to read something. I want you to think with me for a minute. Blessed is the man, this is Psalms 1, who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law, in his way, in his commandments or in his principles, he meditates day and night. And here's the promise: if I do that, he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. That means you'll be stable. You won't be so flexible. You won't be moved around. You'll be stable. See, there's a good side of not being moved and the bad side. The bad side is you're rebellious, you won't change, you won't grow. The good side is you refuse to compromise. You refuse to be moved away and pushed in other directions that aren't healthy. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bringeth forth his fruit in his season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he does shall prosper. The ungodly are not so. Watch this. They're not so. They are like the chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. And what does that mean? That means if I compromise and live certain ways, I end up in a bad place. That's what that means. Don't let that happen to you. Change for just a moment. Back up for just a minute. And ask God to help you not be so hard to move forward. Tell God today that you're willing to consider looking at your life a different way. You don't have to have all the answers, but I do believe that you can become more like Psalms 1. You can be unmovable in a good way, firmly convinced that the right way is the best way for you. Now, at the end of all of this, do I want you to feel bad? No. Do I want you to think about your life? Yes. Do I want you to open your heart to a new direction? Yes. I want you to think about what I'm saying. And for some of you in your life, the area of sexual bondage has been the area of dominance in your life. Compromise after compromise after compromise. Now it's time for you to say, I'm not going to be like this for the rest of my life. I want you to help me move forward. I don't want to be hard to move. Father, I pray that what we've talked about in these last few times together is helpful and uplifting. I pray that there would be this open heart to how our lives can change and how our lives can be better. I pray, Father, in Jesus' name, that this would become a launching pad for a new beginning. I thank you for your forgiveness. I thank you for Jesus who died on the cross to free us. And may they find health and wholeness as they think through what we've talked about. Are they hard to move? Are they hard to move to a good place of blessing and opportunity? Are they privately committed when no one's around like Joseph was? And Lord God, are they willing to say, no, I will not cross these boundaries? In Jesus' name. Well, listen, it's been a blast. I've enjoyed being with you these last few minutes. Let me encourage you to do something. I got some new series coming up that I want you to stay tuned for. Make sure you stay with us. I'm going to talk down the road about relationships and how to fix a relationship that's gone off the cliff. That's right. I'm going to show you some keys to help your relationships be better. I've also got some great teachings coming along for single people. I want to show you some principles of how to find the right mate. If you're looking for the right husband and the right wife and you're trying to figure out what to do, I'm going to give you some clues and show you how to do that. And then thirdly, I'm looking to talk about work and how you can get into the career you want and how you can make your work life the best life you ever had. So all that's coming down the road, so stay tuned. Make sure you email me if you have more questions at pastor@overcomingbyfaith.org. That's pastor@overcomingbyfaith.org. And so you be blessed. We'll let you know more next time. Stay tuned. There's more coming down the road. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Are you ready to experience a continuous stream of God's Word and its practical application to life's issues? Now you can any time of day or night with the all-new Ricky Temple Television and Ricky Temple Radio online. Log in to www.rickytempletv.com or rickytempleradio.com and join all programming in progress. So experience Pastor Ricky Temple online whenever and however. Log on today. Overcoming by Faith is subscribed to Right Now Media, a Netflix of Christian resources designed for the total family. And best of all, it's available at no cost to all members and friends of Overcoming by Faith. You'll receive instant access to over 1,000 Bible studies featuring topics for youth groups, home Bible studies, men's groups, women's groups, parents, married couples, and more. Stream online anytime, anywhere. Right Now Media delivers a library's worth of content without taking over a library's worth of space. Overcoming by Faith presents this gift to you and your family. Right Now Media, Christian content online.